morning. Welcome to Viking Preparedness. I'm Pastor Joe Fox. One of the problems we have in society today, in American society, is that too many of us, too many of the people are not thinking, right? They're emoting, they're parroting instead of thinking, investigating, studying. Too many of us will take something that we heard or read somewhere else and then just start putting it out like it's truth without any critical assessment or thought or fact checking or back checking or things like that. And we think we're right. See, that's the problem with how the brains are wired of Americans today. It's like they honestly believe that they know what they're talking about because they took the word of five other people who took the word of five other people, but they're not really doing any research. I get it. Y'all aren't academics. You know, Americans as a rule are less and less academic. But there's something out there that's been wrong that needs to be corrected in the hardcore Christian movement, the Hebrew Israelite movement to a degree. People, I'm talking generally people of strong faith, people who actually get into their word and tear it up and care about what's written there and do their own research to a large degree, not to a large enough degree, in the word. And that is this: 501c3 churches. There's a lot of people out there who say, I would never go to a 501c3 church, or pastors, that there's things people think they know about 501c3 churches. You believe that you know this, and you know it in your brain to be true, that pastors can't preach about whatever they want when they're a 501c3 church, or they're controlled by the government, or the government can tell them what to preach, and all these things out there. And people say, I would never go to a 501c3 church, or I can, like somebody on my comments that, where everybody's hammering me on that one thing because there's a bunch of other people who think they know what they know and they don't have a clue. But they're like, you sound like a 501c3 pastor. I didn't even preach in that video, but whatever. They don't know what that means. It's just a word they parrot, and then it builds its own little meme. And so, let me tell you about 501c3 churches. I had one for 6 years. I was the pastor of a Christian church up in Kansas. When I became the pastor, it was a 501c3 church, and we never changed it. Shofar Mountain is not a 501c3 church. Do you know how much less influence I have on the government telling me what to preach in Shofar Mountain as opposed to Round Prairie? Zero. When I was a 501c3 preacher, do you know how much I guarded what I said? Not at all. Do you know how many letters, emails, phone calls, and personal visits I got from the man telling me what I could and could not preach as a 501c3 pastor? None. See, that's bunk. What 501c3, and you can look it up yourself. You can go to the IRS and read the documents for forming a 501c3 corporation, and you can figure it out on your own. What a 501c3 does and doesn't do is this: it gives the church tax-free status. Now, what does that mean? What does that look like to people? That means if one writes a check, an offering check to that church, like when I was the pastor of Round Prairie Community Church, $5,000. You can deduct that from your taxes at the end of the year if it's a 501c3 church. If you were to write a check to Pastor Joe Fox or to Shofar Mountain, for $500, you cannot deduct that from your taxes as charitable giving because it's not an officially sanctioned church. Okay, so what are the limits? So that's what that means. All right. It also means when you're a 501c3 church, you get a special tax number, which we had at Round Prairie. And when we had to buy a new refrigerator for the church, we went to the store. We didn't have to pay taxes. You just give them your little tax ID number, and they write it down. You fill out some paperwork, and bam. So the church could buy the refrigerator without paying taxes on it. So you're tax-free. So that was kind of cool, actually. It was a good thing, right? What you cannot do as a 501c3 church, you cannot become overtly, that's a key word there, you can't become overtly political. You can't turn your church into the headquarters of the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or the Tea Party or any other party you want to make up. You can have political candidates speak from your pulpit. Now, why any pastor would want to do that is, beyond me. But a 501c3 church can have any political candidate come preach, teach, talk at his church. Many do. But then if they do that, they have to leave the opportunity available for the other side. So if you invite a Democrat to come speak at your church and say, you can speak to my people on Sunday. Again, I would never do that. I don't know why anyone would. I do know why they would, but I wouldn't do that. But if you invite a Democrat to come talk, you've got to leave the floor open for a Republican to come also. All right, you got to be fair about it. If you violate, and you're not allowed to politically campaign. And so what's political campaign? That means you can't protest against abortion. False. No, you can go protest against abortion. What you can't do is hand out flyers or something like that that says, oppose measure 421. You can't say that because now you're being political. What if you do? What if the pastor says, I don't care, a 501c3 pastor, right? He says, I don't care, we're putting out handbills and we're going to hand them out to everyone to say, oppose Proposition 44 because it kills babies and it's not what God wants, right? Something like that, right? Something political that a church would get into. What happens if they do? What's the penalty? The only penalty is if the IRS investigates it, that's number one, and they find that, there's been an egregious error on the part of the church, that's two, they can revoke the tax-free status of the church. That's it. So they just take away your 501c3 if you violate it, if you violate the political, restrictions on it. That's it. So now the church has to pay taxes on the offerings that they have come in, and actually they don't. If you read the fine line on that, a church doesn't have to pay taxes on offerings, whether or not they're a 501c3. But people who donate to the church won't get a tax break if they're not a 501c3. So they could lose that. And the church couldn't go buy a refrigerator and not pay taxes. If the IRS finds that they're an egregious error and they say, all right, you're losing your 501c3 status. That's it, people. So this is like this little meme amongst believers that, 501c3 churches are bad and non-501c3 churches are good. That's something you thought you knew that you don't know. I'm telling you, it made no difference on what I preached, taught, talked about, what kind of activities we did. None. It's not the 501c3, it's the actual body. Who makes up the body? Who is leading that body? How is that thing structured? What are they teaching? Yeah, we're not going there right now, but that's the problem with churches today, what they're teaching. I'll just end this, and some of you will get it, and most of you won't. Sister Kate and I were just taking a drive the other day, someplace we hadn't been before. We drive by this big church, one of those huge churches out in the middle of nowhere that you wonder, okay, how do they fill this church on Sunday? And it said, 4,000 egg Easter egg hunt. 4,000 Easter eggs. Woohoo! Praise Jesus. All right, I'll see you out there.